This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News. And as part of a series of interviews with the political leaders at Guildford Borough Council, I am today with James Walsh, who's the leader of the Labour group at Guildford Borough Council. James, welcome back to the Guildford Dragon.
Good afternoon, Martin. Good to be here.
Thank you. And so let's get straight into it then. It's been 16 months now since the Borough Council election. This is something I've asked all the political leaders. You've had plenty of time now to analyse that result. What conclusions have you drawn?
Obviously, it's a difficult election for us, but it was one of the best ones we've had in a few years because we gained a member in Howard. And for us as a group, that's been it's a massive difference between 2 and 3 people. That actual third person gives you a bit more wriggle room, a bit more debating space.
You're talking about Howard Smith in Westbrook.
Howard Smith, yeah, in Park Barn, yeah. Obviously, it's disappointing for the RG the residents group who lost control of the council. I thought they expected to win it, and so I think it was a bit more of a crushing blow when they didn't win it, and the Lib Dems won with a
Why do you think that was?
I think Josh was talking about like a sort of political now, so there might have been a bit of that. There was the campaign against North Street that they had to contend with. I think just the Lib Dems are a more established party and have a sort of better campaign machine, really. Politics is difficult. In elections, you do have to have a machine and a sort of campaign plan in place. They're also very focused on the local plan, and they sort of didn't really deliver on what people were expecting in that term. So I think they were hit by that as well.
Right. You think R4GV were hit by not reviewing it?
I think so, yeah. I think the promise was so high in the election before that. They got in an overwhelming majority. For a party come from nothing to running the council effectively, that's a massive achievement. But it was built on sand. You know, they had to deliver on what people expected, and that was a tough call for anyone.
Okay. So what's your view of the current administration's performance? You voted against a no confidence motion against the council leader. Do you have confidence in her now?
Yeah, I do. They've had a tough. They came to a very tough situation. The whole thing with finances, and I think probably more importantly is the cultural problems in the council that I think have been underlying the council for the last 10, 15 years. It's not just under the coalition, under the Lib Dems or under the Tories. I think it goes back longer than that. And none of us were aware of it. So that's all, Labour, Tories, Greens, we're all going along thinking everything was fine because we were told that things were fine. That all blew up last year, and the Lib Dems under Julia, in particular, have been sort of tasked with cleaning up the mess. So my position on this, and I've sort of led the party this way, is to help, because for us it's about the residents of Guildford, doing the best thing for the residents of Guildford. We could have easily capitalised on it and worked with the Tories and RG4 and tried to get rid of Julia and made a bit of politics out of it, but that really wasn't the right thing to do. My position was, let's have the report, solace, and then we'll start holding people to account, because there's everything's laying on the table now. There's a recommendations to take us forward. If they don't deliver on that, that's where we will start, calling for heads if necessary. But we haven't been in that place for the last year and a half. So it's about giving them the space to breathe. They've had that. Now it's time to deliver. Okay,
well, there's several things there, but we haven't got time to discuss them all. But if we look at the Lib Dem administration, it was in power with R4GV, wasn't it? So it was at least partially responsible for the record of the previous administration. And it was during that administration that the HRA overspend largely occurred. Now, do you think the investigation into that, which is still dragging on, do you think the delay in concluding the council's own investigation is acceptable?
I have to be careful with this because there's an allegation of fraud.
I'm not talking about the criminal investigation. I'm talking about the internal GBC investigation.
Right. Yeah, that ties up to the cultural things I'm talking about, and a lot of us weren't aware of that until the sort of can of worms started opening.
Right.
I don't think it was a case that this has all happened in that time and nobody did anything. Because
but do you think? Do you think that it's been managed well? That we've still got the investigation going on over a year after the arrests were made, and well over a year after the investigation started, which, to my information, was in at least June last year, to 2023. I mean,
I think something this complicated takes that long. If you look at any fraud trial or any issue to do with money, it takes a long time to untangle. There's a lot of elements to this that I can't talk about, things I don't know about, and they will take time. We'd
Okay.
all like this to be done in 6 months so we could all get back on track, because at the end of the day, it's affecting our tenants.
So
And
you
we
do.
all, whatever party, we all want to make sure that they feel comfortable.
So
And
you
obviously, with
think
this
it
going
is.
on, it's nerve-wracking.
So you think
Sorry,
it is
Martin.
acceptable, even though those that have been suspended, have had to be been in limbo all this time.
It's not a case of acceptable. It's just the way it is. It has to be, a process has to be followed, and that takes time, and it takes a lot of investigation and evidence gathering and everything else. It's not comfortable for anyone. People at the sharp end of this, the people, like I said, our tenants, and us as councillors, we have to talk about this. I'd like these things to be sorted out and move on, but it is what it is, and we have to sort of follow the process. If we don't follow the process, we're not going to get to the right conclusion.
Okay. Now, what about the finances at the council generally? What shape are they in your view? Has the risk of a Section 114 notice, i.e., more or less declaring bankruptcy, has that risk disappeared now, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Josh made the point the other day about he thought we weren't close to that anyway because we had the asset base. So we've had that massive pillow that Woking is the extreme case, but other councils similar to us just didn't have. We didn't have that asset base to fall back on if we had to. And the key thing here is the officers that have come in, Richard Bates and his team, have just revamped the finances, revamped the performance monitoring, all these sort of dry things you get in your big council agenda are dead important to kind of how the government, the council runs and the finances. All that's been overturned and overhauled, and I've got a lot more confidence in it now. We're still on a journey, but I feel a lot happier than this time last year.
So you think Richard Bates should take a lot of credit for that, by the sound of it?
I think Richard Bates, his team, the council officers, because we've worked with the Lib Dems the executive body with this, so we've worked together. And it goes back to the point I was speaking about earlier on about working together to get to the end of this. Then we can get into the politics if we have to. And this is all about that journey. It's about us, the council, as a group, collective, working together to get through this. And I've said that from the beginning. There's a time for politics and there's a time to get action for our residents. For me and for the Labour group, it's about the residents, what's best for them. And what's best for them is getting the council sorted out and the finances straight.
Okay, so wouldn't it be best for residents for the government to reintroduce grants to local authorities so, you can get the spending back on what some people might think a more even keel?
I was thinking about this the other day actually because I joined the council in Slough back in 2008, and that was just right at the tail end when we said revenue support grants, and it made a hell of a difference having that money. You could plan better. At the moment, ever since then, it's been about planning as we go along, working out how much money's coming in and different sources. So yeah, I would, if we had an infinite pot, which we don't, I would definitely support revenue support grants and more income from the government. There might be a way of doing it with business rates, having a bigger share of that. I don't know. There needs to be a better settlement for all local councils. Local government is really important. If you starve at funds, there's only so much you can do by sort of trimming it and doing things different with partners and working in collaboration with other councils. That only goes so far. You need money.
But other countries manage this better when there's more separation between local financing and national financing. In other words, local taxes don't go up to a central pot and then redistribute.
Yeah.
They stay local.
Yeah, there could be a good argument for that. I think we do need to look at local government. It's kind of evolved since the 19th century. We had the big reforms in 1974. We've got 2 tiers in Surrey, probably 3 if you count the parish councils. Is that necessary? Do we need smaller unitaries? And I've raised this before as well. My mind's still made up on that. But I find it frustrating as a borough council to walk around Woking Road or Larch Avenue, say in my ward, see potholes and not be able to do anything about it. Whereas if I know the council has a pot for potholes, then I can have that sort of local impact. So, right, I've been here, cover the money. And we need to sort of look at ways of streamlining local government, I think, and making it more effective.
Potholes are a county council responsibility, really.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Devolve that from county to borough.
Oh, I see.
Because we're the local councillors
which you would be able to do if it was unitary authorities, you mean? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Next question then. How important... the Lib Dems have been criticised for a lack of openness, but aren't all political parties economical with the truth when in power? Isn't it just real...
I won't say economical truth. You have to, when you're governing, you have to be as open as possible and transparent as possible. And obviously, when you're doing negotiations, for example, tenders, you have to be careful with the information.
But I don't get the feeling that change. No one is expecting you to open up about which supplier is, saying, giving you what kind of quote, or saying, we've got to open up all the staff reports. People accept that. It's when you
I don't know they do, to be honest.
well, I think most sensible people would accept that
Yeah.
you're not going to publish your
But this is the issue, though. This is the issue, though. When you talk into this, depending on which media you're looking at, like we talked about earlier on about issues, national government, the media jump on every little nuance and make it into a story it isn't. So you have to be kind of clear about the transparency. Be trying to be transparent about everything,
Well,
because otherwise, if you leave any
I'll give
sort
you
of
a specific example then. I asked Julia McShane the other day how many houses were still not compliant with electrical safety inspections.
Mm.
Don't you think we should know?
Yeah, what answer? What did she say?
Didn't answer it. It was a written response.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I'm not.
I've
I
asked,
don't want to pick just on Julia, but because it's not just her. This is a pattern of behaviour I detect.
yeah, I think on that I've asked that question as well, because we in the Labour group was very keen to get like a register of social housing to find out how things are in terms of the electricity, the gas, the state of our stock, and that doesn't exist. Or if
Right.
it does exist, we've not seen it. So work is ongoing. So I think in that case, she's probably not answered because they're still gathering together the information,
Well, then that
which
could
again
be said, couldn't it?
goes back to the cultural issues about why is this not in place.
Okay. All right. Now, how important do you regard compliance with the Nolan principles generally? Because, of course, there's more than just openness in there.
Yeah, completely important. You get elected as a councillor, and there's an expectation from the public and from yourself if you're a decent councillor, how you should behave. And I think by and large, most politicians on all levels abide by those. Some bend it, which is not acceptable. Some ignore it totally, which is certainly not acceptable, and they should pay the price.
Mm.
You have to be honest, you have to be transparent.
How much do you? I mean, could you now list all the Nolan principles?
No, I see it as a set of values. If I'm in a council,
could you name them? Could you name them?
not offhand, no.
Okay. And do you think
Because
most? Well, that's honest of you. But do you think most councillors could?
probably not, but they're not instinctively. It's about good.
But I can, James. So why is it that I can and councillors who have an even more important duty to comply with them can't?
Mm. I don't know. Perhaps because we're just living the job. Really, we're doing the job rather than sort of focusing on the.
Okay. Well, I'm doing the job.
How it was.
It's a different job, but I mean, I still have time to learn those because I think they're so important. But I appreciate your honest answer there because I think that is true. And that's why I wonder if really it's being taken as seriously, not but across the board, political board, as seriously as it should be. Okay. Now the new Labour government's honeymoon period has been short-lived, it seems. How would you rate their performance?
Excellent. Said the Labour group leader. It's a funny one because on the important issues, they've been spot on. In particular, the riots that happened very soon after the election. Very serious issues that could have gone. You could have an indecisive leader, and it could have got completely out of hand. I mean, Keir Starmer, I think he's, for all his sort of appearance, maybe he's a bit of a robot. The kind of narrative you've got on him. I think he's quite ruthless, and you need that. I think nowadays with what's been going on in terms of that sort of politics, that kind of right-wing politics. So that's been really good. Some of the other stuff about the allowances and the clothes and this kind of stuff.
Well, I was going to ask you. I mean, who's sponsoring your wardrobe?
Oxfam. Closely? Okay. No one. No, I think it's important to say nothing wrong has been done by accepting the money. But for me, it's kind of you make a decision. What does that look like to somebody who's living, having a cost of living crisis?
Well, and your clothes being paid for. They've cut the winter heating payments, and it is going to affect people who are finding it difficult to make ends meet. Would you think that was the right decision?
We've got this 22 billion hole that we're all hearing about, and things need to happen. For example, I know a lot of older people in my family as well who get £300 winter fuel allowance and they don't need it. And they say to me, I don't need this. Yeah. So there needs to be a way of redistributing that to those who do need it.
But I think around this, they're not. They're going to. So people over 11,000, as I understand it, not a huge amount of money these days, are not going to receive that anymore. That's not the right way to do it, is it?
But the pension uplift as well. The aim is to redistribute the monies, and that's the allowance as well as the the pension uplift is to redistribute to those in most need. The problem is, it's a difficult thing to do. It's very hard to communicate, and I think the communications on this was bodged at the beginning, unfortunately.
I mean, it's not all down to communication, is it, though? Because I mean, the pension uplift you talk about, that's meant to, account for inflation. But now they're having 300 of that wiped out because of the cut in the winter fuel. And for someone on an income, that's not very high, that is going to hit them.
It's that middle group, isn't it? And that's the worry we've all got.
So don't you think it
in
has?
crude terms, in the crude terms, you've got the rich pensioners and you've got the poor pensioners. There's pensioners in the middle who are just getting by, and they're the people that need to. And there's a lot of push there to sort of apply for the pension tax credits, etc.
But shouldn't they have waited until they had that better definition before they cut the benefit for everybody?
Quite possibly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, to be honest, yeah. And that comes down against the communications. Explain why it needs to be done, because it does need to be done. Explain how you're going to do it, and most important, explain how you're going to help the people who are going to be hit at the edges.
Okay. Do you think there's going to be a swing back to the Tories in May when we have the county council elections?
No.
You don't?
No. I think the big problem is people are cheesed off of politicians of all hues. And if you have to push me, I'd say the Lib Dems are benefiting from that. Because they play this game about being above politics, even though they're dirtier than the rest of us sometimes. I think there's a loathing for the Conservative Party out there at the moment, and it depends on which leader they go for. There's one there which I might think is acceptable that could bring them back to centre ground. The rest of them, no chance. So I don't think, unless they elect, say, Tom Tugendhat, I don't think that's going to benefit them. But my feeling is people are still angry about what happened under the Conservative government. Right. They're angry at Labour because of the various stories flying at the moment. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And again, I think it comes down to local campaigning as well. I think there's lots of issues in Surrey.
The Lib Dems could be the winners, even though sometimes they have employed dirty tactics, I think you said.
They do it in a way where it's the story in the paper is about Labour because it's the governing party, or the Tories because they're a governing party. Lib Dems are not a governing party, so that gives them a big blanket to do bits and pieces. And a lot of people in the Labour Party and Tories are fed up with their bar charts on the disingenuous bar charts and leaflets and things. They get away with all that kind of stuff because it's all a bit like, then it's not serious. But locally, it plays well. It plays well for them.
Now, time's against us, so we must move on. But I want to move on to housing. GBC was ahead of its previous housing target, I believe, by 44%. In other words, it was 44% over what it should have been building in, I think when I checked, about the time of the general election. But now, of course, there's a new housing target to be imposed. But does the Labour government understand, do you think, that housing delivery is largely not in any planning authority's complete control, because they can grant planning permissions, but they can't make developers build? Do you think they understand that?
I think they do. I think there is an issue with some local government, local councils that don't build enough houses. I think that is an issue and that needs to be addressed. But I think there's an issue with land banking as well, with developers. And I think I spoke to you earlier on about this, about I saw some policy about addressing this, about tackling, introducing disincentives for developers to land bank.
Penalties, you mean?
So whether that's sorry?
Penalties,
yeah. I think that will come in due course, because the housing crisis is such now that we need to build 1.5 million houses on the next 4 or 5 years. To do that, you need the councils to be compliant. You need developers to be compliant.
And do you think that's okay to have much higher targets in areas like the southeast, which is already the most densely populated region of Europe?
Yeah, we need homes. There's 2,000 odd people on the.
You're not worried about the density of population?
It needs to be managed, doesn't it? It needs to be managed, but you can't expect some up north to take everything, or the whole of Guildford town centre to take everything. You need to spread the load. Guildford needs to take its fair share, but also some of the areas. And I've always said, again, the economy needs to be spread out. We're in a world now where the economy doesn't need to be centred on London as much as it has been. It's all e-commerce and everything. So there's opportunities to sort of spread out to the north and sort of build more houses out there with the jobs. At the moment, we're still like a southeast centric country, so we do need houses here. Okay. And importantly, we need social housing.
Yes. Okay. Well,
we really do.
I wish I had time to discuss that more. But just one final question. I've heard politicians talk about the grey belt as areas that have already been developed. but we always used to call that brownfield, and that was always the priority for new developments. What's the difference between grey belt and brownfield in your view?
Yeah, well, brownfield remains the primary source of building. If any brownfield we develop that, the grey belt is that kind of green belt you can build on, or it's more acceptable to build on. So it'd be things like an ex-car park, or as I mentioned earlier, those pieces of green belt that are a bit scruffy on the outskirts. I understand that those things can be developed, and then recompense can be found elsewhere. So you'd reinstate that green belt in a place which is more
our time's about to run out, so I have to call it a day there. But thank you very much for your time, James.
Thanks, Martin.